And what I do, we are bang on the time, so I'm going to get going. There's a few other people coming in, but I want to get started on time. So, Jonny Bevan, police burnout coach. Those of you haven't ever met me before or had any sort of dealings with me, I'm a serving police officer at the moment on child protection team in Bristol, but I'm also a stress and burnout coach. And I help people that are really the main people I work with help are those perfectionists, those people that are overworking, very self-critical perfectionists who are always doing more, always think that only they can do the job as good as only they can do the job to this certain standard, and always taking on more and more. And then what happens is that often leads to them feeling really stressed, burnt out, probably very self-critical of themselves and others, and they get very resentful and just don't like their job anymore. They lose that spark, they lose the love for the job. And I help those people get that spark back without changing anything about their job. Okay. And I'm going to show you a bit about how we do that. Today, I'm going to show you a bit about how we do that. But before we go any further, with this today, there is a chat box. And now anything you put in the chat, only I'll be able to see. And it's the same with the Q&A. So if you do have any questions as you go through this, if you sort of think you want to ask something clarified, feel free to do that. And what I'll do is I will answer it live. So I won't post an answer, because what that'll do is make it available for everyone to see. And you obviously might want to remain anonymous. So I will feel free to put your stuff in on the Q&A, and you can put it on the chat as well. And then I will answer it as it comes up. Okay. And I think that is all we need to know. And the thing is, it is being recorded. So there is options as well to come on live and speak, but just being aware this is being recorded, and I am putting this out onto sort of my social media platforms. So if you're here, no, because it's a webinar style, and people won't know that you've attended. They can't see that, only I can see who's attended. But just know that if you come on, say your name or anything like that, that is going to be going out on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. Right. Today is very informal, really, because I want to chat to you about imposter syndrome, and mainly my journey with it, my experience of it, and especially recently, because I've experienced it from time to time. I never thought it was that big a deal. But recently, even with all this work I do, all the coaching I do, it really hit me hard. And I'll explain where it was and the context of it. But what I want to do is talk you through how I brought myself out of that. Because I made this change in really quickly, like in a day. Now, that's not to say that you will necessarily do the same, because obviously I've got the background of the coaching. I know how to self-coach, but this is what I show people how to do. And this is the main thing, really, is when you have the skills of being able to coach yourself, when these problems arise, they're not a problem. They may seem like it at the time, but they're not really a problem, because you have the skills to bring yourself out of it. And suddenly these times that you have, these sort of what feels like lulls or low points or things that happen to you, actually what they are, as corny as it seems, they're opportunities for growth. And I want to talk you through about how I actually did this live time. So you actually realize we're all human. We're all going through this, but what it doesn't have to do, it doesn't have to spiral. So the background behind it is, for those of you who know me, I do quite a bit of whitewater kayaking. And I was going up to North Wales. There was a memorial paddle. So someone sadly, a professional kayaker, Bren Orton, sadly died early on in the year whilst kayaking. So there's a big memorial paddle. And everyone was going up to North Wales, Llangollen, and there's going to be like 500-600 people paddle away. Now, before, what I'd have done, and this was like the good side of it at the time, was before I wouldn't have gone to that. I'd have planned it. I would have said I was going, put all the great intentions in, and then not gone, probably. That's what normally would have happened, especially if I didn't know anyone that was going. So I just decided, because I increased my self-confidence through the coaching, I went, yeah, I'm going to go. So, and I wasn't really thinking about it. I was like, yeah, I'm just going to go up. That was it. And my family then said, oh, we're going to come up and we'll watch you. We'll come up and do something while you're doing the paddle, and then we'll meet you at the end. And then I found out one of my mates was going. He was going to be up there. Who's a very good paddler, and he was with a group of other people. One of them I'd met before, one of them I hadn't. But so I was really looking forward to this. It was going to be a great experience. But what happened is, as I came down over the field, we parked up, wife dropped me off, and I was feeling really confident. I was like, yeah, this is bloody all right, this. And I was sort of really aware of how much I'd come on. Like before, I'd been more nervous about it. But I walked down over the field and was like, yeah, this is all right. And you can see all these paddlers. There's hundreds of them. Never seen it like it before. And like, we're all there for the same reason, to celebrate this person's life. But what there was some extremely good paddlers. There's professional paddlers, the best in the world. There's my mate and all these people that were really good. And as I stood there chatting to my mate, and because actually I thought it's probably going to be better if I don't know anyone. But for me, when I was stood there chatting to them, I had this massive wave of imposter syndrome. I was in this field of 500 people, and I may as well have been on my own. I just felt totally sort of isolated, alone, and I was just like, actually, I find it hard to interact with people. And then what happened was we had to do a bit of, after they did all their speeches and that, we helped them pack that away. And then we paddled off down the river. And what I noticed was I was really quite withdrawn, and I was isolating myself, and I wasn't sort of talking, wasn't being myself, because normally I was sort of having a bit of a laugh, having a joke. And actually it got worse and worse. And when I was on the water, I felt this massive, it was like needles in my head. It was absolutely, I didn't want to be there, but I did want to be there. And I could feel myself just sort of almost like shying away. And the things that I wanted to do, so for example, we ran this river, we ran this one rapid down. And normally, if I was on my own or with people that were maybe, if I was higher up in that group, what I do is I go, oh, I'll go back up and do that. But I wasn't doing those sorts of things. And what really came up for me, not at this time, but when I reflected, was it was all this fear of looking stupid. I didn't want to look stupid. And what happened was I went off on I was fighting it. I wrote some notes down so I remember sort of almost, because it's still quite sort of raw for me, but I was also fighting that. The fact that I was withdrawing and I was isolating myself, I had a lot of judgment over that. So I was on this river there for this great thing, not really enjoying it, trying to force it. And then I get off and I felt quite exhausted. I felt really, not because of the paddle, because it was a relatively easy paddle. I just felt mentally exhausted. And what I wanted to do was get out of there. And it was like this, once my family were there, once my wife was there, my boys, I just felt this instant, oh, I'm safe, or they're there. And I felt like they're in this part of something, but I was quite keen to get out of there and go. Um, but this was playing on my mind, especially because I am a coach and I get coached. And I was thinking, so why is this? Why is this? And I went back to the campsite and it was bothering me, but I just let it churn away. And then it was the next day that I did the work around it, and that I got the awareness and the turnaround. But this is probably very common for many of you. Okay. This is probably very common. The fact that you can be somewhere and feel like the outsider. You can be with people that are probably being very nice and welcoming, but you still think you're the outsider and you don't belong, you don't fit in. And so what I did was, the next day I got up and I started walking up. We were staying by the National Whitewater Centre, where it's a different river, but where I was paddling that weekend as well. Now, the morning before, So if we rewind, before I'd gone to the memorial paddle, I'd gone up on that river on my own and I was fine. I was actually doing some of the best paddling I'd done. But when I'd been with this group, I felt this imposter syndrome. And then I knew all those people were coming to this whitewater center. And actually, I really didn't want to be in that position again. And when I got up, I was walking up and I was like, oh, and I could see that it's really interesting how it affects all your abilities. When I was on the river that day, my paddling was a lot worse when I was experiencing that imposter syndrome. My skill level, my ability actually dropped. And when I was then going up to go on this river the next day, I had lots of fear about it and I didn't want to do it. I wanted to withdraw and go home. And I noticed that in the past, that's exactly what I would have done. Remember when I first started canoeing and I was on the X and I felt like I wasn't good enough. I wasn't a fit there. And I ended up getting a very minor injury, but using that as an excuse to get out of there. But I didn't want to do that this time. So what I did was I went up, I started walking up, and I noticed this judgment. Now, I always say to people, there's really sort of three voices in our head. We've got this sort of voice of fear, then we've got this voice of judgment, and then we've got this voice of kindness. Now, often for a lot of us, the voice of kindness is not very strong. It's the voice of judgment. And I could see I had lots of judgment about the way I'd reacted. I'd been looking forward to this thing, and now I'd been that way. I didn't like the way I'd been, so I had a lot of judgment about it. So the first thing I did was I was like, I need to drop that judgment. So I need to be aware of that judgment, just listen to it, and then just actually learn not to listen to it. So I was aware of that judgment. And I asked myself four questions. And this is how I really got started because my head was absolutely buzzing in the morning. It's all going over and over and over. Lots of I don't fit in, I don't belong. What are you doing here? And all this sorts of stuff. And so what I did was I asked myself four questions. And I'll tell you those questions now. And these questions are important because we don't actually remember the situation as it was. We remember it as we are now. That's the thing with our relationship with the past. Our past is not so much that it's affecting our present. Our present, how we are now, is affecting how we remember the past. And of course, we see it all bad. And then because we see our past as bad, it affects our present and it affects our future. So these questions are like evaluation questions. And they normally I would ask them after I've done something, after I've gone to something, but I actually did it at the start. And I went, right, what went well? What went well? And write that question down. We always ask what went well to start with, because your brain will want to look at everything that went bad. And I just picked like three things of what went well. And for me, it was, well, actually, I turned up on my own somewhere, which I wouldn't have a few years ago. I committed to something. And even though I did feel a bit of apprehension about it, I did it. That's a win. That went well. The other thing is, even though when I stood in that field, I felt the imposter syndrome, I actually did make an effort and talk. And I made those connections. And even though I noticed myself shying away sometimes, there was times I then went towards that. And the other thing that went well was I noticed that it was imposter syndrome. I noticed that I had enough awareness to know it wasn't this situation that was creating the way I was feeling. It was actually something going on in my mind, in my brain. So those were like big wins. And the reason we do that is because suddenly you start feeling like, oh, actually, this wasn't a complete bloody disaster. This is actually quite good. The next question you do is what didn't go well? Because you want to be honest. I want to be honest with yourself. And what didn't go well was I let that little voice in my head get so loud and I believed it and I let it affect what I was doing. So whereas I wanted to go up and run a rapid again, I didn't want to do it for fear of looking stupid. So I gave in to that. Now, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just a recognition of actually that didn't go so well. That's what I wasn't so happy with. And then when I got at the end, I left early. I didn't stay and talk to anyone. And then so you got what went well, what didn't go well. And then the next question is, what did you learn? So what did I learn? And suddenly I was like, what I've learned is I still have obviously things going on with imposter syndrome. I learned that actually when I think I don't fit in, what I do is I withdraw and I come away And actually, I take action, which makes me go quieter. So then I don't fit in. And I was looking at all the stuff I'd learned. And I thought, actually, what I've learned is when you back away from these situations, you don't get any experience, so you don't get any confidence, which is then feeds into that imposter syndrome. And then the last question is, what will I implement next time? Because it's all right going, what went well, what didn't go well, what did I learn? But if you don't implement something next time, you don't improve it. And I was like, actually, what am I going to implement? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be more myself, and I'm going to be more aware and lean into the discomfort that I'm feeling. So I go, well, actually, next time, if I do all those things, even though I experience it, that's a win. So asking those 4 questions really, really helped me. It quietened that voice in my head, that voice of judgment, because it was like, actually, this isn't a bad thing. There's a lot to learn from here and a lot to take from it. And I remember walking up and I stood by the bridge and I was like, right, I've got to be honest here, what's actually going on? And what I did, I started getting awareness. So this honest reflection is really key. We don't want to blame the situation. We just want to see it for what it is and what was going on. If we're not honest and we're not able to reflect, then we can't really learn from that. And as I was going up, it's really hard for me to actually experience, because as I was walking up, I was like thinking about what had happened and questioning why it had happened. And now there's lots of ways to get awareness. Some people journal. I didn't have a bit of paper there. So what I was doing was I was emailing it to myself. 2 reasons. One is because it gets out of my head onto something I can see. And the other one is I thought I don't want this lost, because I knew as soon as I started getting the awareness, I knew I was going to move on from it very quickly. And this is the thing. When you do this work, you can make changes and you don't recognize those changes. And I wanted to remember how I was feeling at that time so I could tell you guys. And so I was sending emails and that, and sort of just myself, and just writing it all down, how I felt, what I was thinking. And what something that came up for me was, which hadn't ever sort of, I wasn't aware of, was like, where had this come from, this imposter syndrome? Because the thing is with coaching, it's not about banging on about the past, but it is, I think, useful to know where it's come from so you can have some kindness and compassion to it. And what I realize is I have this recurring thought that I don't fit in, I don't belong. I've had it all my life, all my life. It just keeps coming up that I'm different. That's another big one. I'm different, and I think that's now my superpower. Yes, I am different. That's good, but sometimes that thought comes up very negatively. But one thing I was like, where have I got this from? And it's clear as day. And I was on this bridge. It's called NRA Bridge, and I was looking over at the river, and it came up, and I was literally back to when I was a kid. And I was in maths class. I remember it's clear as day. I must have been, I can't remember the exact year, it's not that clear, but I must have been about 13, 14. And I remember putting my hand up. There's this group of kids, the group of lads, 4 lads, who ironically I'm quite friendly with one now. But at the time, every time I used to say something, they used to take the piss. And I was never in the popular group. I was never the popular one. I was never, and in fact, sometimes I used to purposely move myself out of those groups because I liked being different. But I remember putting my hand up to ask a question and then ridiculing me and feeling really embarrassed and then not wanting to ask any more questions. Now, I was brought up in a way of my dad would say, well, just go and fill them in. That wasn't really in my nature, but that's what I did. I ended up getting a fight with them. And what I realized is through this awareness was this inner child, this child is still in me. We call it our inner child. It's still there. So it has this memory of embarrassment, humiliation, rejection. So it's now anticipating that in other environments, and it feels unsafe. It's trying to protect me and it's trying to move me away so I don't have to experience that. And of course, in that scenario, what I did was I fought my way out of it. But my other way that I would respond to it is by avoiding it. And this is the thing where the awareness is so key, that honest reflection. Because as I was like typing it all, suddenly it was all just coming into my head of like, oh, this is where I've got it from. And it's just an understanding. And that's the fascinating thing. I was saying, like, well, no wonder I withdrew on that river and pulled away, because that's a learned behavior. Because as a kid at school, who when he put his hand up was ridiculed and had a go at, the behavior was to avoid, avoid, avoid until you couldn't avoid and then you fought. But of course, when you're on the river, or for you guys, it might be at work, when you're feeling that way, that's avoiding makes you shrink away and not be part of the group anyway. And you're really not going to fight your way out of it, are you? But you can see I had that learned behavior. And I had this awareness that actually what I needed to do was this sort of inner, what we call this inner child work. And it is as simple as showing that inner child that is safe, that is still in us. We're not going to get rid of it. We're not going to try and push it away. But what we want to do is show that, have compassion for that inner child, go in, I I understand you want to react this way because it's helped us in the past. It's, you think it's benefited us, but now it's not benefited us. And this is the key bit, is looking at how we're responding now. Is that benefiting us now? And looking really honestly, that honest reflection, did it have benefits for us in the past? Yes, because it kept me safe. It stopped me getting ridiculed every 5 minutes, although it probably didn't because they carried on doing it. And actually, you can see that that behavior we've adopted has somehow protected us, but is not helping us now. So it's getting all that awareness. And this is a really important stage. The awareness stage is huge. You don't want to rush it. And what you'll find is the reason we don't like it is because it brings up lots of emotion. That brought up lots for me. I actually had tears and I was like, oh, and I was like, but what it is like a release because that's in us anyway. And all that was coming up. Now, as I went through the rest of the day, it was like light bulbs going off because I just sat with it. And what my biggest awareness was, and can't remember if I've written it on this next page. Yes, seamlessly. There we go. What my insights were throughout the day were I had this thought I don't fit in, like I've said before. I don't fit in. And this one, I'm not as good as them. Because what I found was, and this is really common with imposter syndrome, we think we don't belong, we don't fit in, and we're not as good as someone. Okay. And then, but what I've noticed is if I go kayaking with people, my peer group, or people that are less confident than me, I'll go and do stuff and really push myself. And actually, because I feel like I'm top of that group, I'm the best in that group. But what I found was when I'm not the best in that group, then the imposter syndrome comes in. And as I was walking up the river and I'd gone back, got the boat, was paddling up, and I was feeling loads better because I'd had this awareness. And what I realized was when I'm thinking I'm not as good as them, that's actually true in a lot of ways. Skill wise, I wasn't as good as them. There are people there that were the best in the world. My mate paddles all the time. You know, he's 24, I'm 45, I've got a family, he's off paddling all the time. I paddle a few, a handful of times a year, really. But I was that thought, I'm not as good as them. I wasn't equating to skill. I was equating to me, to my value. As in, I made it mean because I wasn't as good at kayaking, I was not as good a person. And this is the thing you probably experience like with your work and that. If you're seeing someone that's better than you at that job, they may be better, they may actually just have more experience, they may have different skills, but it's when we make that mean something about us. And it's getting that separation that this is something we do. And I remember going up the river thinking, this is just boats. This is lumps of plastic on the water. This means nothing about me. And if someone's better than me, then actually that's fine. And what I start getting this awareness is when I have this imposter syndrome and I think that them being better means something about me, my failure, what happens is I don't try so hard and I don't ask them, so I don't learn. So I can't be as good. Actually, I avoid paddling with them and I don't want to be. And then I can't, they won't be able to teach me and show me. And really what it was, it all comes down to, which is all imposter syndrome is the fear of judgment, which I didn't think I had. I thought I've done so much work on this, but it just goes to show that brain can like, click in and it's going, you're going to be judged, you're going to fail. And because of all that stuff I've experienced when I was younger, I now want to behave that way now. But the key is our past doesn't have to control our future. And in fact, it doesn't have to have any impact on it, I believe, because we can redefine that past. We can reframe that past. We can decide what we make it mean. And when we change as we are now, we'll see that past very differently. As I did with the even that looking back on that day of paddling, I was suddenly like, this is a great moment because it's what's actually made me realize is squeeze this imposter syndrome out. And actually, it's what's made me move on. And I actually looked at it and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was because how I was changing in that moment. Um, and the awareness I also got was I was, which I worked on so much in my work and my day job of policing and with the coaching, is that I was reliant on the achievement for my self-worth. So I was seeking approval. So, and what I would do is I'd either withdraw if I couldn't do anything for fear of failure, but also what I noticed is I would also want to push myself in front of others to impress them. And all of this, if you haven't got a good relationship with yourself, you're not going to be able to do this sort of honest reflection because some of it you go, Christ, I sound a bit big-headed. But this is just what the brain does. Actually, and I could see like back in the past, oh yeah, I'm doing something here, not necessarily to improve, but I'm doing it for approval. And there's a real difference, isn't it? Improve or approval. And actually, what I was looking for was approval. And that was my overall big insight is this one here, that I was seeking approval. And what I'd say to you, if you have these awareness stages, whatever you're looking for on the outside is what you need to create on the inside. So whatever you're looking for, so I'm looking for approval, and I think I need to be good at something to get that approval. So then I'm really tirelessly trying to be good at something. I'm not saying we don't go and be good at things, but when we're doing at it to get that approval, then that's going to be quite depleting. What we need to do is look at like, what am I seeking and play it out. If I suddenly went down, I paddled like a ninja and I was absolutely amazing, what do I want? Someone to go, oh, he's good, isn't he? What would I make that mean if they said that? That I'm good at it, that I'm good enough. And that was a real insight for me because I thought I don't have any issues with my self-worth. But clearly there was something in there. In this community of paddlers, I wanted to be part of it. And that's all part of being human. Our brain wants us to be part of a tribe, part of a community. And all this is really is outdated wiring, topped off with lots of social conditioning of seeking approval from the outside and that our job means something about us, when in truth, it doesn't. So I spent the next day with this awareness, and the day was very, very different. It was so different. I was suddenly with the same group of people, not all 500, but there was some of the other group that were there. And I walked up and I sort of went, I decided actually, once I got this aware, like, who do I want to be? Who do I want to be when I'm here? And I thought, actually, I just want to be myself. I want to be accepted for myself. I got things to offer. I may not be the best on the water, but I got a lot to offer to people. And there I walked up and the van door was open, and these people wouldn't even know I was experiencing this. You know, they're really nice people that probably aren't judging me at all. But that side of it doesn't matter because we're judging ourselves. And what I did was I just walked straight up to the van, was chatting to them, and I felt completely, completely different. And this is why the awareness is so key. And you get to decide then what you do moving forward. Because I went from one day with these group of people going, I do not belong, I do not fit in, to suddenly going out and going, oh, this is brilliant, I do belong. And what I realized was when I was then on the river, I was doing things, I was really aware of things I go, oh, I wouldn't want to do this normally. I wouldn't want to get it wrong in front of them. But I was willing to do that. But also, I didn't then push myself to the point where if I seen something, I thought, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to make that move and I don't really want to hurt myself. Whereas to impress someone, I might do it. I wasn't doing it. And what happened was I ended up with this really, really nice day on the river. And what I found was I almost like reconnected with myself. I was like, actually, this is now a great thing. This has happened. And something happened when I was down, I was hiring boats and someone gave me some advice to do something. And when I want to fit in, I can sometimes take advice and go along with things. I go one way or another. I either take advice and fit in with stuff I don't want to do, or I completely reject it. But when they were saying it, I was sort of like listening to them going, actually, no, I don't want to do that. But it wasn't like a complete rejection. It was like I've considered it, but I'm going to do what I want. And this is what I've realized is when I have that feeling I don't fit in, I then strive to fit in. And then I show up as someone that I'm not. And then these people like a version of me, but not the real me. So then you have to keep wearing that mask. And then that is exhausting. I see this in work all the time. And like I say, it's just interesting how it comes up in different areas. Because for me, it doesn't come up in work. I'm 100% authentically me. But in this environment, it did. But then I was able to do this work and quickly change it. Now, you've got that awareness stage, you've got that deliberate thinking of who you want to be. But also, what you've got to realize is when you're acting this way that you want to, there's going to be discomfort. And discomfort is normal. In fact, I think it's the one thing that holds most people back, the the experience of discomfort. But when you realize that is part of the deal, that's part of change. When you're one person thinking, feeling, and acting one way, and then you decide you're going to act another way, you're still maybe having those thoughts and feelings, but you don't have to obey them and you don't have to struggle with them. You don't have to fight them. You could just acknowledge them and accept them. You just go, okay, yeah, I know I'm feeling this. I'm feeling like a bit like an imposter because I'm thinking I don't fit in. That's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to do this instead. And there will be a slight discomfort, but that is the discomfort. That's the path to change. And every time you take action from that new identity, what you're doing is it's a vote for that future self. And it's really quite powerful work because you get to decide. But it doesn't feel like it didn't feel like a massive struggle for me because I'd done this work and I was really honest with myself and sort of had that conversation with my past self, this inner child, and realized actually this inner child's just in me. It's still there. They're just a scared child that thinks that I'm going to get ridiculed and it's going to be really harmful and it's going to be horrible. But actually, I could show them that's not the case. We're okay. We're safe. And it was really quite a sort of game changer for me. But for me, that was the thing. Find out what you're seeking. Find out what you're seeking. Now, some people it might be, and this is all going ahead. What am I seeking? Some people might be love. I've coached people before, and maybe they're trying to fit in. They feel like they don't belong because they've not been shown love when they were younger. And this is the main difference in coaching and therapy. That if there's an issue with that people need to, they're stuck in that past, then they may need therapy to, because I'm not a therapist, they may need therapy to get out of that past to the present. The coaching helps you with the present to the future. So if you're stuck, so actually we will go into the past, but only just to see where those beliefs came from, and then to have compassion for that past self. Because you can forgive this inner child, you can forgive that past self for doing those things because they didn't know any better. They've just done what needs to be done to protect you in that moment. But when you see that no longer serves you, you may choose not to change it. But when you see that it doesn't serve you anymore, then you get to change it. And it all starts really, I think, with that compassion, with that honesty and that compassion for that inner child. Because any of you that got kids, you'll know if a child wants something and they don't get it and you shout at them, they just shout louder. And if they're scared and you tell them not to, just tell them not to be scared and have a go at them, they get more scared. So this is about actually creating a safe environment for that inner child that's in you. And what you'll find is as soon as they feel safe, then you'll feel safe. Because if you think like you've got this inner child and you've got this adult. So you've got the emotional child and you've got the emotional adult. And when the adult doesn't feel safe, the child definitely doesn't feel safe. But when the child's not feeling safe from those sort of past experiences and it's responding this way and this learned behavior, but you can go, it's okay. as the emotional adult now in the present, you can go, it's okay, we're safe now. That quietens and that can give you a new perspective of the present. Right. And that's basically what we talked about. This is basically how I changed it, is the awareness, the allowing the discomfort, the acceptance of it. Acceptance is huge. The acceptance of how I was, not beating myself up. So what we want, I'm going to add on there as well, if you want to remember this, acceptance, no judgment. The biggest thing that will move people on is dropping judgment. We're all naturally judge ourselves, but we want to be aware of that inner critic, that judgment. Because when you just accept, yeah, actually, I went on that trip, and do you know what? I was withdrawn. I was quiet. I wasn't myself. That's okay. Okay, that's acceptable. I can't do anything about that, but I can look at that in the future. Acceptance of how I was in the past as a kid. Acceptance isn't just like giving up. Acceptance is accepting what is an actual reality and accepting yourself as human. Because this doesn't mean anything's gone wrong with you when you're experiencing imposter syndrome and all stuff like that. It's just you're human, and you need to be able to accept that, because when you accept it, you can deal with it. And then deciding who I wanted to be. So how do I want to show up when I turn up and say I go and paddle with people that are a higher standard than me? How about when I go into an environment where, if I go some time in work or in my coaching business, where there's people that are a lot higher, not higher than me. I don't like to think of like a hierarchy, but they've got more experience than me. That's really the key. How do I want to be? Well, I want to be the student. I want to be able to be the teacher when the time's right to be the teacher, but also I want to be the student. So I want to learn. So what have I got to be able to do that? Well, actually, I've got to manage that part of my brain that doesn't want me to be the student. And I just got to be curious, ask questions, and be willing to be vulnerable, and be willing to look stupid, and be willing to fail, and be willing to be rejected. Because there will also be people, we don't want to flower it up, there will be people that when we go and do something, they will have judgments. And I think it's just coming to me now, really, that I can think of times when I've been paddling, when I've seen people go, oh, roll their eyes when I've had a swim or something like that. Now, we've got to be careful with that, because we see it through our eyes. We don't know actually what the other person thinks until we ask them. But maybe let's just take it that it does happen. People do judge us. Well, actually, when you're deciding who you want to be, you've got to decide who you want to be with that judgment. How do you want to be when someone judges you for something that you love doing? Do you want them to have that control to stop you doing it or not? And making that decision from this point where you've got the awareness, you've allowed it, and you've accepted it is a really, really, really powerful place. And then practicing. So, all right, doing all this, coming to the awareness. I used to coach people. I remember coaching someone once. We did all this sort of work on imposter syndrome. And this is where sometimes I got to take my own advice, because I coached him, and we get this great awareness of what was going on. And they'd be, oh, it's amazing. But then he'd go out and he would resort back to the same behavior. But when we then had this awareness, and then he went out and practiced being his future self. So when his decision to this be his future self, when he went out and practiced being that future self, what happened was he'd feel discomfort. He'd feel discomfort because he'd have all those thoughts of not fitting in would come up. But you have to practice it, because when you practice it, you learn to allow those uncomfortable feelings that come up. And it's actually those feelings we're avoiding. This is the thing with imposter syndrome. What we're really probably fearing is rejection, embarrassment, humiliation. And if we've experienced something like that in the past, especially as a child, we're really going to want to avoid that. But when we've decided who we want to be, and we don't want these people to have control over us, we can then practice this, okay? And then when we're practicing it, we're learning to allow the discomfort, just uncomfortable emotions, whilst getting the awareness of where they're coming from. And then we get control. And as you're practicing taking action from your future self, you're getting a vote for that future self, and then you change. And I obviously did this on this day very quickly. And what I did is then we go around with this awareness, and suddenly I was like, blimey, actually, this is coming up everywhere. Whether it be a networking event where I go networking, and sometimes I go network and I think, oh yeah, there's that little thought, and I feel a little bit uncomfortable. But actually, when you realize you don't fit in, or you've got nothing to offer, and you feel embarrassed, ashamed, whatever that feeling is, it'd be very different for each person. Then just watch what you do. What do you do when you feel that way? Do you not contribute so much? Do you withdraw? Do you not ask questions? Do you judge yourself, beat yourself up? And then what result does that give you when you do those things? Because what it does, it feeds into that initial thought that we have that we don't fit in because what we do is we don't do anything to contribute. But when you become aware of it and you allow it and you've decided how you want to be, you can move through that. And you don't have to do this. You don't have to do this. But what I'd say is if you want change, there's no change without discomfort. I used to try and tell people that they could, probably because I wanted them to make that change. But actually, I realized there's no point flowering it up, is there? There is discomfort. There is discomfort. But you're probably in discomfort now. And you've got to decide whether you want the discomfort of change, the immediate discomfort of going towards that fear, or the long-term discomfort of staying the same. And that's really a choice. So that is the steps. And this is some insights that I had during this. And I coach people on this all the time, and I say it, but actually having experienced it really firsthand, it really cemented these things for me. First of all, we're human. That's it. We are human. You will experience this. Imposter syndrome is normal. In fact, if you want to move out of your comfort zone and do something different, you are going to experience imposter syndrome. It's normal. It's just literally like a thought comes from a thought. It's not the environment. It's a thought. I don't belong. I don't fit in. That is all it is. We're human. We're going to experience it. Probably if you're in a room, everyone's thinking that. Just watch when you're with people, how much people's they might seem confident, but then maybe the legs are tapping, they're twitching a bit. That's because of the adrenaline, the fear, the cortisol is in there, probably because they're thinking the same as you. So we are human. And I'm going to put there as well, kindness and compassion. Everything is solved with kindness, compassion, and curiosity. And self-belief. Really, all imposter syndrome is a sign of a lack of self-belief. And we don't always have strong self-belief, do we? That's just life. But it doesn't mean there's anything gone wrong, because we don't believe in maybe we can do something we haven't done before. But we can just become aware of that and see imposter syndrome instead of seeing it as a problem. It's just an indication that there's something going on for us. Some belief in us that we actually want to change. Notice I didn't say need to, because there's no need to. It's just whether you want to. And create what you're looking for. So in other words, whatever you're looking for on the outside, for me is acceptance, you have to create that on the inside. Because you can only receive what you feel yourself. So if you don't accept yourself, you won't receive that from other people. I see it so many times where people are seeking approval. They go out, they seek approval, but then what happens is they reject it. So if someone says, oh, you're really good at this, and you don't believe it because you actually think you're not good enough. So what you want to do is start whatever you're trying to get from the outside. You need to first create it from the inside. And then if people go, wow, then I won't want it. I won't. Are you just saying I reject it then? I just tell people I don't need that. Well, no, actually, you're more likely to receive it, but it's a nice to have, not a need to have. And when you need it, you're reliant on things and you're out of control of your life. And what you do isn't who you are. This took me a long time, and a lot of you will probably fight this. You may describe yourself as a police officer. I am this. I am a mother. I am a father. I am a, whatever your occupation is. But I'm a kayaker. I'm this. But what you do is just what you do. It means nothing about your self-worth and your value. And if you can get that separation, then you can be kinder to yourself when you do make mistakes. People will go, perfectionists will go right to the other side and go, oh, well, that means if I'm not really tied in with all this, I'm just going to be shoddy. It's not the case. It's not the case. I really detach my identity as a police officer and what I do. And actually, what I found is my learning curve went up and I was less defensive. I listened to criticism. When I did things and someone criticized, actually, I would go, no, actually, you might have a point there. But also, when people did criticize me and I thought it wasn't just, I could evaluate it, see what good I wanted to take from it. And actually, if I just thought they're just not being particularly very nice, I could just discard it. I didn't spend time trying to prove people wrong. And so you don't waste all that energy. So whatever you're looking for on the outside, start creating it on the inside. And sorry, that's what you do isn't what you are. And marginal gains. Marginal gains. Marginal gains is if you want to be good at something, it's a gradual process. It's not an overnight thing. And the problem is when you see people that are better than you, sometimes you can try and want to make too big a leaps and then you don't hit it and then you just give up altogether. But when you just look at it and measure against yourself, so you measure back and against yourself, nothing else. You don't compare against other people. You might want to learn from them, but they're on their own journey. And you'll always find someone that's maybe better than you. And you're probably always going to find people that are worse than you. But what you want to do is look where you are and then measure back. And I didn't really touch on this, but this is what I did on the river. I went up and I was like, so on the river, there's like features and stoppers. Now, the first day, I didn't go into many of them. There's one called Chapel Falls, and I didn't go into it. But then the next day, I went in, so I was side surfing it, going, but because we don't see our gains, we still compare against other people's progress. So we don't celebrate and take credit for how much we've improved because then we go, well, yeah, but so and so can already do that. And oh, yeah, but they're doing it, they're doing something even better up there. But what we don't see for us, that's a huge step. When I first went there, it was almost like a dream of mine to have the confidence to go into Chapel Falls and play around and mess about and get trashed and roll in it. And I was doing that like it was nothing. So you want to look at the gains, your gains, not anyone else's, and measure back. Now you will fall into measuring yourself against other people, but just again, get the awareness, notice it, and then actively measure yourself, measure your progress. And that is really key. And that is everything I've got for you. It's a bit shorter than I said. I put in the time just in case it went on a bit. But what I wanted to do really is do this. So anyone experiencing imposter syndrome, one, knows it's normal, okay, that there's nothing wrong with them, and also knows that actually there is a way out of it. You do not have to live with it. I promise you, it is not something you have to struggle with. And if you've got something from the past, you can easily let go of that. You don't have to be in that place where you're in a room of people thinking, I don't fit in. And why is this so important? Because it leads us to overwork. We're striving all the time. And even when we get our results, we still don't see the success we've created. And I don't want that for you. I want people to be doing stuff and going for their job and striving to be better, but not proving something about themselves, just enjoying it and just doing it because they want to. Because then we can live the life that we want. And if you listen to this and you go, actually, I want to talk more about it, just come and have a conversation. If you want to experience coaching on it, I'll put a link. I'm going to post this up, so I'll put a link on it. And what you can do is you can come and experience coaching. If you think it's not for you, you can go and step away and go, that's it. But what you'll do is get some insight and actually experience this firsthand. And what you'll do is you'll find it'll help improve your self-confidence, your self-belief, and it'll have a massive impact on you and those people around you. What you can do is you can start lifting others up as well, which is great. So that's it. Unless there's any questions, I'll just give a couple of minutes just to see if anyone's got any sort of questions or anything like that. And then we will sign off. But thank you all for coming in. And like I said, I'll put the recording up. I'll stick it on LinkedIn and Facebook and places like that. And if you know anyone that you think actually they would benefit from a conversation with me, please just put them in touch. Okay, Jonny Bevan, the Police Burnout Coach. So thank you very much and have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.